technically this is illegal action from Hyundai suppliers, but is the Attorney General Steve Marshall going to prosecute Hyundai for violating the law? Obviously not. He's bought and paid for by these folks.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
We're taking a look at this report right now. The impact of incarcerated labor in Hyundai's U.S. supply chain. This was put out by the Columbia Labor Lab. And so what they did is they partnered with Jobs to Move America to survey workers at Hyundai and in Hyundai's supply chain. So some of those parts manufacturers, people who work for the temp agencies, et cetera, and they did a survey about, working conditions, how many incarcerated workers are in the workplaces where you're at, et cetera, and the researchers found just stunning things in Hyundai's supply chain. So I'm going to read you the key findings from this report. Based on a survey of Alabama auto plant workers and related sources, we study the incidence of incarcerated labor in Hyundai's U.S. supply chain. In the survey, those working in the Hyundai supply chain in Alabama report earning 10 to 15% less than other auto supply chain workers in the state, even accounting for education, race, gender, and age. And so I want to make sure that folks, I want to underline this, because this is not saying workers in Hyundai's Alabama supply chain earn 10 to 15% less than auto workers nationally. This is 10 to 15% less than other auto supply chain workers in the state. And auto supply chain workers in the state of Alabama make significantly less than auto workers do nationally. And so the fact that Hyundai workers are even still further behind than the average Alabama auto worker is appalling. Here's another key finding. Workers in Hyundai's supply chain also report more safety hazards and more frequent negative experiences such as wage theft, forced overtime, harassment, and lack of breaks compared to other supply chain workers in Alabama. And again, Alabama auto workers have it worse than auto workers do nationally. 2015 report indicated that auto workers in Alabama are twice as likely to face amputation on the job, to have an amputation on the job, than auto workers in Michigan. Twice as likely to lose a finger or a limb. I mean, that is huge. And so then again, Hyundai supply chain workers are even more likely to face unsafe working conditions. In the Montgomery area, where Hyundai suppliers are concentrated, auto supplier wages are 7 to 9% lower than expected compared to similar jobs elsewhere in Alabama and nearby states. One contributor to these disparities appears to be Hyundai's use of prison labor. Multiple Hyundai-linked suppliers employ workers from Alabama's prison work release program, with prison labor especially concentrated in auto parts manufacturing in Montgomery. We find that a 10% increase in the share of incarcerated workers in a plant is associated with a 10 to 14% drop in wages for free workers. We find evidence that this is explained by the fact that incarcerated workers are far less likely to quit over low pay due to coercive prison conditions, which gives employers leverage to lower wages and working conditions for all their employees. So this is just really, really appalling findings, and I appreciate the Columbia Labor Lab looking into this stuff. The Alabama Political Reporter did an article on it, and Hyundai obviously not happy about this. Chance Phillips, writing in the Alabama Political Reporter, quotes from the press conference where a worker talks about being hurt on the job, snapping a bone, and being bandaged up and told to keep working. This worker, Mark Miller, recounted his time participating in a work release program, describing a general lack of safety precautions, insufficient training, and the constant fear of being sent back to prison. I mean, snapping a bone and being wrapped up and being like, all right, back on the line. That's nuts. That's totally nuts. And so Hyundai sent a statement to the Alabama Political Reporter saying Hyundai is aware that some suppliers participated in the state of Alabama's inmate work release program. However, Hyundai was not involved in any supplier's decision to participate in such programs. Consistent with the standards and values to which we hold ourselves as a company, we mandate that our suppliers and business partners strictly adhere to the law, and we have an established track record of taking action when alleged violations occur. That would be fascinating to see what they're pointing to on their track record. Taking action when violations occur. The spokesperson also pointed to a section of the company's supplier code of conduct that states in part that suppliers should ensure they do not produce for Hyundai Motor Company in whole or in part goods produced by forced labor.
Hey, 5 seconds, just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
And this is how so many of these companies are able to get away with either egregious violations of the law or just unethical business practices, right? And so, because, technically, this would be, this is actually technically a violation of the law. Chance Phillips points out that under state regulations, people in work release programs are required to receive, quote, compensation equal to that or of comparable workers and no less than the federal minimum wage. And so, technically this is illegal action from Hyundai suppliers. But, of course, is the Attorney General Steve Marshall going to prosecute Hyundai for violating the law? Obviously not. He's bought and paid for by these folks, right? And so, but this is one of the ways that these companies and these international multi-billion-dollar corporations skirt the law and skirt expectations is by having this spider web of entities that they're connected to that quote unquote, do the dirty work for them, right? Hyundai does not produce all of its parts. There are a lot of parts that are manufactured for Hyundai vehicles that are not produced by Hyundai, quote unquote, right? So they have these relationships with these suppliers, almost like Amazon does with its delivery service providers, so that Hyundai can incentivize these suppliers to skirt the law, to exploit their workers, to pay low working conditions, to exploit prison labor, child labor, undocumented immigrant child labor, and they can reap all of the benefits from all of these ethical violations, legal violations, et cetera, et cetera. And then when it finally comes out that these violations have taken place, Hyundai can say, as they did in this statement to the Alabama Political Reporter, it's just our suppliers. We had no idea. We're totally in the dark about everything that our suppliers do. It's total BS, right? I know it, you know it, they know it, everybody knows it. It's total BS. That's why the system is set up in the way that it is. But we're all just kind of supposed to pretend that we don't see what's in front of our eyes. They quote a little bit more from the Columbia economics professor, one of them who did the report. Even when you just look at free world workers, the non-incarcerated workers, we find that plants that are using a higher share of incarcerated workers have worse wages, worse working conditions. The survey specifically found very significant results that incarcerated workers were less likely to quit in response to a hypothetical wage cut, but we also found that free workers find it hard to quit. And so, the idea that this isn't happening, right? The idea that that they're not using incarcerated workers to drive down wages for everybody is, kind of beggars belief. And there are obvious things that we could do in response to this to make things better. Just like there are obvious things that we could do in response to the scandal that came out a few years ago where undocumented children were found to be in Hyundai's supply chain, alleged by the Alabama Department of Labor and the U.S. Department of Labor. There are lots of things that we could do in response to that, and some people want to use those stories to scapegoat immigrants and to say that we need to deport a bunch of people. But if what we're actually worried about is worker exploitation, workers not making enough money, then we can just raise the minimum wage. And if we don't want to raise the minimum wage for everybody, we could raise the minimum wage for companies like Hyundai that get tens of millions, hundreds of millions of state incentives. We could connect those state incentives to higher wages for working people. And then, everything's taken care of. We don't have to do this whole Rube Goldberg machine of if we do this huge deportation program and get rid of a bunch of undocumented workers and harass a bunch of undocumented children, then, the market pressures are going to increase and native-born workers might get a little bit more money. We could just make a law about it. You could just say, if you want to get hundreds of millions of dollars from the state of Alabama, guess what? You have to pay your workers $20 an hour. And then bada bing, bada boom, everybody makes more money, except for the billionaires at the top, right? If you're going to get hundreds of millions of dollars from the state of Tennessee, you have to have safe working conditions. You have to respect your workers' right to organize on the job. You can't be union busting. Very, very simple solutions, and we don't have to do this whole Rube Goldberg machine sort of thing. If we're actually concerned about raising wages and improving working conditions for working class Alabamians, working class Tennesseans, and we're not concerned about like brown people moving next door.
One of the things I wanted to point out is like one of the reasons why the incarcerated workers are often eager to participate in this system, however exploitative it is the extreme violence and despair inside the general prison population, right?
Yes.
We've talked about that extensively on this show. Alabama's prison system is unconstitutional, according to our own federal government, due to the cruel and unusual punishment that is experienced every single day in the prison system here in this state. And so it's understandable that folks would see, this is a better opportunity than being stuck there. But, that really begs the question of like, how free is the labor that's being used here?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're getting this job just so that you can get some respite from Alabama's prisons where literally hundreds of people die every single year. Exactly. How free is that labor? There's a big question there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we could do much better. As you said, there's a lot of tax dollars that are going to support this economic development, to support companies like this. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect some strings attached to it. But, we've heard loud and clear from a lot of politicians in Montgomery that they don't want to do anything to interfere with private business.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.